Four Nights of the Apocalypse chapter 188 is officially out, and we've actually got things resolved from the cliffhanger of the last chapter with Nazien's heart stopped beating, and now it seems that we're not only getting the setup for the actual fight for Percival and diodora and moving on with the tournament, we are getting some really nice intimate moments, as well as fully seeing just progression for specific ships. One in particular. But all I'm going to say is that this was a fun chapter, I liked it, it was very heartfelt, and it left off being kind of adorable. Which, in all honesty, with how dark and twisted the last couple of chapters ended up being and kind of nerve-wracking, it was much needed. And we got to see King Indiana in this chapter too. Spoilers, I guess. But enough of the preamble and lead up, let's jump right into the chapter. But before we do anything, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps, and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. And if you want to see me talk about American comic books, don't forget to check out my second channel, GW Comics, where I talk about primarily right now Marvel and DC comics. I'm currently covering some of the absolute DC titles right now, and I got a big video on Absolute Batman's opening issues in the works right now, which will be out within the next couple of weeks, so look forward to that. Now with that out of the way, let's jump right into this chapter. So chapter 188 of Four Nights of the Apocalypse, titled Father's Words, Mother's Memories. Cover image is just Nazians plopping down on the ground after having their heart stopped. As diodora walks up to Naziens, saying how afraid he was that his heart had stopped for a moment, but it looks like yours stopped instead, didn't it? As the crowd is just in utter silence, and Gother realizes that this isn't a good situation, as Naziens seems to be dead cold right now, like fully dead in this instance based on what Gother can see. And right as diodora is taking his sword up into the air to deliver the finishing blow to kill off Naziens, Gother, using the announcer powers that he has for the tournament, and probably best use of being the announcer right now, decides to call the match in diodora's victory, in this instance, to save Naziens' life, at least in hopes of saving Naziens' life and declaring diodora the winner to have him move on. Which, honestly, Gother, every single time you jump into this series, you always somehow manage to make the right calls half the time, most of the time. So once again, huge support character. Loving Gother in this sequel. But after hearing this, diodora is kind of bummed out because if he doesn't kill Naziens, he won't get Naziens' magic. But instead of, putting the sword down, diodora then gets a sinister smirk and devious smirk on his face, saying, oh well, let's just say that my hand slipped, as he's about to just finish off Naziens anyway, with An screaming for someone to stop it. But it's in that instance that diodora gets a nice sucker punch to the face, as we get a full page showcasing Percival jumping into the arena to save Naziens' life, or at least stop diodora from finishing off Naziens, and this is a very satisfying image of Percival. Chef's kiss right now. You love it when a character gets a much needed punch to the face. And as diodora is knocked back very impressively by New, and I'm pretty sure Percival probably held back a little bit. But as diodora is getting up, all of a sudden, the pain and damage that the Percival dealt to diodora got transferred to Percival as he got the punch to the face with the same amount of force, making him bleed. As all diodora does is just laugh in sheer ecstasy and joy, basically telling Percival if he was paying attention, he'd know that throwing a punch was only going to hurt him in the end. But it's then we get a really awesome image of Percival just staring down diodora, telling him to shut up, as his magic force is just billowing up as he is beginning to heal himself, as he's not paying any mind to the damage that diodora kind of transferred onto him. And diodora gets a shiver down his spine and ends up looking down, which I'm pretty sure in this instance diodora got an ounce of fear, at least having a feeling that Percival is different. That's what I'm getting from that image. And then Percival goes down to Naziens to try and shake him awake, telling Naziens to hang in there and open their eyes. Diodora walks over to the Purgatory Beasts and tells them to get up, and if you do nothing for me, next time you're dead. And apparently these are their names, Sia and Snark, which might actually confirm that these might actually be the exact same Purgatory Beasts from Diodora's introduction, not just Purgatory Beasts that are similar, just more deadly. I guess they're just like being manipulated by diodora and commanded to like be incredibly ferocious, and that was their true colors. I guess that's what I'm going for right now. It's then that Tristan comes in to try and help Naziens recover with his healing magic, with An and Donnie heading down as well. Percival using his hope abilities to try and rejuvenate Naziens, as Tristan tries to use the goddess blessings to revitalize Naziens, as Percival is just trying to get Naziens to wake up and come back, as he is just completely stressing out, saying, why isn't he opening her eyes? Your life spirit is still inside of you. But Gawain tells Percival to calm down for a second, as even though it's very slow, there is a pulse for Naziens. He's most likely in a near-death-like state, which is something that we all kind of speculated based off of how things were set up previously. Also, I just like, despite Percival trying to bring back Naziens, Naziens wasn't actually dead, and there was nothing much to heal Naziens from based on this state, since Naziens is still technically alive, so that is interesting to really think about, and I like how Gawain is the one to kind of reel everybody back and notice that Naziens isn't completely dead yet. As An and Donnie make it there, An speculates if it was a poison that did this to Naziens, and if Naziens ended up getting the blowback from it based off of Diodora's power. And Donnie's asking the question that he thought that Naziens was invulnerable to any self-conjured poisons, as then Percival looks down at the vial on the ground, as Percival says that's not what this is, as he clenches onto Naziens tight, saying that was an untested poison, one that Naziens' body never experienced before, which brings us all the way back to, I believe, the Fairy Realm arc, where we had a bit of a flashback with Naziens, talking about how poisons are something that Naziens specialize in, but also with how Hendrickson ended up warning Naziens to be careful with these types of poisons, as it is very likely that too strong of a dose, or there is a poison out there that even Naziens won't be able to fully recover from and manage to adapt to in their body. So I like how Percival instantly knows this and fully understands that this is the reason why Naziens isn't waking up. And it's then they transition into a flashback back into the Fairy Realm. It is most likely during the course of the 2-year time skip before Percival's revival, based on how Naziens refers to King and Diane. Naziens is picking berries and about to eat one. It's then in that instance that King manages to run up to Naziens, telling him not to eat it, as he was just in time to make sure Naziens wouldn't eat it. Explain to Naziens that these jet black berries are called blood skulls. Just ingesting its juice is like putting one foot in the grave. Eat a whole berry and you're instantly comatose, as it's a type of magical plant. As Naziens asks, so comatose, but not dead? But then King transforms into his fat form, which to show just how nervous and unsettled he is right now, lecturing Naziens, telling Naziens, are you listening to me? When I say comatose, I don't just mean for a minute. There's no antidote for it, your growth and metabolism stop, you'll just sleep forever and ever. As Naziens is nervous and saying, oh, alright. Honestly, I like this. This also goes to show that King is still constantly trying to oversee his kid, despite at this point Naziens not knowing that they're his kid, which I kind of like, and shows that King is doing everything he can to kind of look over Naziens and make sure Naziens doesn't do anything too reckless, which I kind of like. Shows a bit more to the time Naziens spent in the Fairy Realm. But then we transition to a bit further in the flashback, where King is actually picking berries with Diane, as they're talking about those particular types of berries. As Naziens says that they didn't end up adding it to the poison crafting repertoire that they have, with Diane saying those are kind of tasty berries, as Naziens is freaking out over the fact that Diane has had those berries before and is still awake, and Diane is just brushing it off like, oh, I just like to eat, you know how it is. As Naziens is wondering what's going on, because they're magic. They put people to sleep forever. But Diane keeps brushing it off, saying that she slept real well right after all that. With Naziens asking and saying that they thought there was no antidote, it's a magic berry after all. But before we get any real explanation about the berry, we transition back to the present, with Gareth coming onto the arena, saying, don't you see them all calling for you? Don't just stand there with your back turned. Why don't you say something? As we see somebody in a very clear white over Naziens' body and behind the group. Also, just really quick attention to detail, Tristan really does look like Meliodas in this one shot. I think this is one of the few times that Tristan will 100% look like Meliodas, like the spinning image of the guy. But everybody is confused as to what's going on, as An asks if Gareth is referring to Naziens' soul. Which, honestly, it's been a while, but I did forget for a second that Gareth can see souls and ghosts. So the fact that Naziens in a death-like state, showcasing that their soul is still kind of hovering over the area to kind of see everybody, makes a lot of sense, so kind of like that bit of utilization for Gareth. And I like this little bit where An is asking where Naziens' soul is all Gareth says is over there and no one can see Naziens at all, which I find kind of funny. but An ends up asking Naziens if they can hear her, asking why did they take such a hazardous thing to begin with in this fight. As Nazien says, I didn't know if I could beat him with any of my poison. With Gareth translating everything for the group to hear, saying, so I took the risk and tapped into it. With Donnie saying, yeah, but if you die in the process, it ain't gonna help at all. But all Naziens can do as they break into tears, saying, I didn't want him to hurt Percival. As Percival asks what the Naziens say. With all Gareth saying is, you sure are loved, huh? As Gareth goes on to explain, if you know any antidote for this, now is a good time to speak up. But all Naziens does is just shake their head and begins to blush and turn bright red in the face, as Gareth realizes something and walks over to Percival, whispering something into his ears. And then we get some inner monologue from Naziens. And I'm just going to point this out now because I've been getting some comments about why I'm kind of being a bit neutral in terms of referring to Naziens. It's because in volume 20's extra pages at the end of the volume, which have not been translated yet, it is basically 100% confirmed that Naziens is confirmed to be a woman. So that ends up being something that I wasn't sure how to bring up in the chapter reviews in case I was going to make a full video on it. But there was no English translation for me to break down the entire thing. So it was kind of a toss-up to try and point it out. But right now in this chapter, it is very clear with how Naziens is drawn that Naziens is a woman. So there's no real way for me to sugarcoat it. But again, I don't really know how I'm going to address Naziens at this point, considering that everybody still thinks Naziens is the guy. So I'll see what happens, because it's a very slippery slope with how this can go. It all depends on whether Naziens just fully tells everybody and Naziens is treated as a girl, or people will still treat Naziens as a guy. So I have no idea what's going to happen with this, but yeah, we'll see. Anyway, back to the chapter after this long ramble. Naziens ends up having an internal monologue saying, I wanted to surpass Ordo in this field someday. I wanted to become a holy knight and protect the future of Britannia, and I wanted to keep adventuring with Percival as long as I can. But there's just no way I can tell them how to undo this poison. As in the next page, Percival kisses Naziens away. Percival x Nazien shippers, you may now rejoice, because now Percival, I believe, has kissed Naziens and not An, so maybe this is progression? Who knows? But either way, this is something I wasn't expecting in this chapter for a literal Sleeping Beauty, Snow White type thing. So, but I guess if we were gonna go somewhere with that route for this moment, hey, why not? It's then that Naziens is shocked up awake by the kiss, as everyone is just staring, with An kind of having a bit of a blank stare, and Gawain kind of chuckling in the background. With Naziens awake now, everybody begins to react, with Donnie saying, wow, he just had to exhale into Naziens' mouth, and then Naziens is awake, with An saying, huh, so I guess it's like saving a drowning victim. Anticlimactic, huh? But Percival just says, I didn't exhale at all. But whatever, I guess, with Percival not even realized that the significance of what he did. And Naziens is incredibly embarrassed and just completely flustered over this, asking Gareth, how did he know? He didn't even say anything about how to undo the poison. All Gareth does is just smile and says, hey, I've always had a sharp intuition like that. I mean, I can see ghosts after all. And I guess the fact that Naziens was just so embarrassed over how to undo the poison, Gareth just took a Hail Mary and was like, you know what, that's probably the case. A kiss is probably going to wake them up, so hey, it worked out. And it's then, after this, we cut to the end of the previous flashback, with Naziens talking to Deanne after hearing that a kiss is all it took for Deanne to wake up from eating that berry, as that being the only known antidote for it. As Nazien's like, wait, it's not like some magic spell, come on, that can't be it. But Deanne just says, not a magic spell, a magic berry. As Deanne just laughs, as the final panel of the chapter, we see a blushed and embarrassed Nazien staring at Percival as he's talking to Gareth, with the final voiceover being of Deanne saying, when you're in love with someone, it can be just as strange and just as wonderful a force as magic itself, ending the chapter. So in this chapter, we literally not only get perhaps some progression for the fact that this is Percival x Naziens for the time being, but also it is basically flat out confirmation with how Naziens is drawn that Naziens is a woman right now. And also Naziens basically finally in this instance just fully acknowledging that they love Percival. So based on how Naziens is drawn and reacting to all this, and the voiceover from Deanne, literally, And I love how Nazians kind of literally had like a short talk about romance without realizing it with their mom. So, yeah, that's how it goes, I guess. But pretty wholesome chapter at the end of the day. I like the utilization of this flashback and the fact that we got a bit more of King and the Ans dynamic with Nazians during the 2-year time skip. So it shows just how much time they spent together and how much they talked. So it's really nice to see them again. I know it's been a couple of months since we saw King of the An and since the end of the Fairy Realm arc. So I'm glad that they're utilized in this way. And this was a good way to really bring in the flashback in. I'm pretty satisfied with this, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen now and if the dynamic in the group will change now, or if Nazians will like fully tell everybody that they're a girl right now. So that's possible. Either way, I enjoyed this chapter. Wasn't action-packed, but we got Percival punching the ever-loving crap out of Diodora, Percival seemingly putting the fear of God in him for a quick instance, and we got Percival and Nazians kissing, with Nazians basically fully coming to terms with the fact that they're in love with Percival. So, yeah, all pretty good. And I like the utilization of Gareth to kind of initiate all this, so really good utilization of one of the new supporting characters. But how do you guys feel about this chapter? How do you feel about how this ended up being with Percival and Nazians and the undoing of the poison berry that Nazians used to try and take out Diodora, but got rebounded onto themselves? How do you feel about the flashback? How do you feel about and the kiss itself? Let me know in the comment section down below. And if you haven't already, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps, and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. Now with all that said and done, hope you all have an awesome day.